The Clockmaker's Promise. In a small, quiet town nestled between the mountains and the sea, time seemed to move more slowly. The cobblestone streets echoed with the footsteps of generations, and the townspeople all knew each other by name. At the heart of the town stood a little clock shop, weathered by the years but still charming, with golden gears displayed in the window. It was owned by an old clockmaker named Elliot. But this story isn't about Elliot, it's about his apprentice, Lena, a quiet, curious young woman with a mind for delicate mechanisms and a heart she kept carefully guarded. Lena had moved to the town 5 years ago, escaping a life filled with noise and empty promises. She found solace in the rhythm of ticking clocks and the kindness of Elliot, who treated her like a daughter. Her days passed in peaceful routine, winding gears, polishing glass, and breathing in the scent of wood and oil. She believed she had everything she needed. That was, until Gabriel walked through the door. Gabriel was a writer from the city, taking refuge in the town to finish a novel that had haunted him for years. His smile was disarmingly honest, and his questions were endless. The first time he entered the shop, he asked Lena what the oldest clock was. She handed him a pocket watch from 1893. Instead of leaving, he stayed. And returned the next day. And the next. He wasn't like anyone Lena had met. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the way she hummed softly when she was focused. And Lena noticed things too. How he always carried a leather notebook. How his hands were ink-stained but gentle. How he looked at her like she was a mystery he wanted to solve, not a clock to fix. Their friendship grew slowly, like ivy on an old wall. They talked about books, stars, regrets, and dreams. On rainy days, he'd sit in the corner of the shop and write while she worked, the steady ticking of clocks around them creating a kind of harmony. But Lena was afraid. She had been in love before, deeply, foolishly, and painfully. She had built walls, and Gabriel's presence was like sunlight threatening to break through. One evening, just before the Festival of Lights that the town celebrated each spring, Gabriel asked her to walk with him. Lanterns floated in the sky, casting a golden glow over the river, and the whole town felt like a dream. Under the soft shimmer of the stars, he turned to her. "Lena," he said softly, "I think I'm falling for you." Her heart stopped. The silence between them was louder than any ticking clock. "Gabriel. I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't know how to love without losing." Gabriel took her hand. "Then let's not rush. Let's write this story slowly. Page by page." And so they did. They didn't kiss under that lantern sky. Not that night. But Lena let her heart open, just a little. Enough to let him in. They shared quiet mornings, long walks, and laughter that echoed through the shop. Gabriel helped Elliot repair the old grandfather clock, even though he didn't know a gear from a spring. And Lena read Gabriel's book draft, giving him the courage to finish it. Seasons passed, and love, gentle and steady, grew between them, not like a flame that burned too fast, but like a clock wooed with care, ticking faithfully forward. Years later, after Elliot had passed and Lena had taken over the shop, a new display appeared in the window, a golden pocket watch engraved with the words "Our Time." And beside it stood Gabriel, still ink-stained, still smiling, still in love. Because some stories aren't written in books. Some are written in time, one tick at a time. When the wind brings you back. In a quiet coastal town named Evermere, where the sea whispered secrets to the wind and seagulls cried like echoes from forgotten stories, lived a young woman named Alara. She was a librarian, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and known for wearing long skirts that fluttered like pages in the breeze. She had lived her whole life in Evermere, her days measured by the tides and the turning of old books. But her heart had always carried a memory, like a bookmark never removed, a boy named Liam. Liam had been her childhood friend, her teenage love, and the person who had promised to come back. He left for the city 7 years ago, chasing a dream of becoming a photographer. On the last night before his departure, they sat on the cliffs and he told her, "When I find what I'm looking for, I'll return. And if the wind ever carries my name to you, follow it." Years passed. Seasons changed. Alara wrote letters she never sent and sometimes walked the cliffside, hoping for a silhouette to appear in the fading sun. She smiled politely when people suggested she move on, but deep in her heart, she believed that love, true love, was not something you could forget. It was like the tide, it always returned. One rainy afternoon in early spring, as she was shelving books, the bell above the library door rang. She looked up and froze. He was there, Liam, drenched, older, and smiling that same boyish smile. "Alara," he said, voice hoarse. "I kept hearing your name in the wind." She didn't speak at first. She simply walked to him and placed a trembling hand on his chest, as if to see if he was real. Then she laughed, a bright, teary laugh, and hugged him tightly. They spent the next days walking old paths, sipping coffee at the cafe where they used to dream, and sharing stories of their separate lives. He had traveled the world, captured sunsets in Morocco, faces in Nepal, and storms in the Pacific, but nothing had filled the emptiness he felt when he thought of her. It was her memory that lived in every photograph he took, every sky he stared into, every quiet night alone in a strange city. "Alara," he said one evening, as they stood under the stars on the very cliff where he once left, "I thought I needed the world to find myself. But all I needed was you." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and replied, "And I was always here, waiting for the wind to bring you back." They kissed, soft and slow, and the sea roared below them as if cheering. From that day on, Evermere had two new storytellers, one who wrote tales with words, and the other with light and lens. Together, they rebuilt a love not from what was lost, but from all that had endured. And in the wind, if you listened closely, you could still hear a name, and a promise kept. When the stars forgot to shine. In a small coastal town named Elmsworth, where the ocean whispered secrets to the shore and the nights were painted with the glow of lanterns, lived a quiet young woman named Leora. She ran a little bookshop inherited from her grandmother, a place filled with dusty pages, pressed flowers, and dreams that lingered between the lines. Leora loved stories, but she had never lived one of her own. Then came Elias. Elias was a traveler. A photographer who had roamed from continent to continent, chasing sunsets and chasing silence. He stumbled into Elmsworth one stormy evening when the sky turned silver and the rain refused to stop. Soaked and cold, he took shelter in Leora's bookstore, drawn in by the golden light that spilled onto the street like warmth. "Sorry, we're just about to close," Leora said politely, peering over the counter. "I just need a place to wait out the rain," he replied with a tired smile. "And maybe a story to keep me company." He found one, her. Over the following days, Elias became a frequent visitor. He'd sip coffee in the corner with a worn notebook in hand, or quietly rearrange the bookshelves when she wasn't looking. Leora pretended not to notice how her heart beat differently when he laughed, or how she began to memorize the times he'd usually come. One evening, he brought her a photograph. It was of her, though she hadn't known he'd taken it. She stood in front of her shop, bathed in the early morning sun, smiling faintly at something off camera. "I wanted to capture the soul of this town," he said. "But it turns out, it was you." Leora didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her that way before, with wonder, like she was something rare. But like the tide that never stays, Elias was not meant to remain. He had a plane ticket. A career. A life far beyond the edge of her world. On their last night together, they sat by the lighthouse cliffs, watching stars appear one by one. "I could ask you to stay," she whispered. "You could," he replied. "But you wouldn't." "No," he said softly, "because your story isn't mine to finish. But maybe, someday, our chapters will cross again." He left at dawn, with only a pressed daisy between the pages of his notebook. Years passed. Leora's shop became well known. People traveled to Elmsworth just to hear her read. She wrote a book called When the Stars Forgot to Shine, a story about a girl who loved a man who belonged to the wind. It became a quiet success. She never married. Then one evening, while locking up the shop, she saw him. Elias. Older. Weathered. holding a camera and a single daisy. "I've been to every corner of the world," he said, stepping closer, "but none of it ever felt like home." "And now?" she asked, voice trembling. He smiled. "Now I'm back where my story began. If you'll let me, I'd like to stay and write the rest of it with you." Leora didn't answer. She took his hand. And that was enough.